Ukraine is going in deep and hard. The final brutal message has been delivered to Putin, and it's precisely what Russia's president doesn't want to hear. Russia is going down. Everything Russian will burn in the occupied territories and beyond, as Ukraine unleashes a brutal tactic that is shattering the rear, crippling the front, and wiping out everything that Russia has. Medium-range strikes are here, and Ukraine is using them to make 2026 the year of Russia's biggest losses yet. If Putin wants a message, the Magyar birds delivered it in an April 16th X-post that made it clear that Ukraine has a new strategy that Russia can't handle. "Worms, you're declared the birds. "We're just warming up the engines. Buckle up. It's about to go all the way down your throat." This is a warning of things to come, sure, but they are also words that will send shockwaves throughout the Kremlin because they come on the back of a night of strikes against Russian equipment and infrastructure in the occupied territories that was unlike anything Russia had seen before. Overnight into April 16th, Ukraine delivered a massive blow to Putin. On the agenda, 16 military targets spanning Donetsk, Crimea, and even Russia itself that were all chosen to weaken Russia's war effort as it attempts to launch a spring offensive. We'll be digging into the specifics in a moment, but on the list were air defense systems linked to Russia's Iskander ballistic missiles, oil depots went down, Black Sea Fleet logistics were destroyed. If it was Russian and within range, Ukraine hit it overnight, and it did so using medium-range drones that are quickly becoming the game changer that Ukraine has needed to turn the tide against Russia in the war. The momentum in Ukraine is shifting, and the footage shows us why. In Donetsk and Crimea, the infamous Azov First Corps is flying FPV drones over key logistical facilities. In footage shared by Anton Gerashenko on X, we see what Ukraine's drones see. Full-color, high-definition footage that shows Ukraine's drones traveling deep into occupied Donetsk, but they are targeting Russia's logistical infrastructure. Russia's air defenses can't do a thing. Over and over, the drones strike, hitting convoys, armored vehicles, troop gatherings, and everything that is part of the logistical network that allows Russia to keep on pushing in Donetsk. Ukraine's drones can now go deep enough and fly so accurately a long way behind enemy lines that they're taking out enemy convoys on the crucial logistical lifelines that Russia needs to use to make its spring offensive possible. The Magyar birds shared even more footage in their X-post, 6 minutes of it in fact, which shows us that it's not just trucks and troops that Ukraine is hitting. The story remains the same. Deep in the occupied territories, Ukraine's drones keep on hitting their targets. Rarely do we see even a sign of Russia's air defenses protecting infrastructure that Putin needs to keep his offensive going. What we do see is those air defenses being destroyed in massive numbers, as the very weapons they are supposed to take out are being used to destroy them. Fires burn, buildings go up in smoke. If it's Russian and can be used in any way to keep Russia's war machine rolling, it's become a target of the drones that Ukraine has tweaked and mastered. What we're seeing in all of this footage is the key to Ukraine winning the war. And that brings us right back to the overnight strikes on April 16th. On the 16th day of April, Putin's true enemy gave to him 16 shattered targets in his military. First, we focus on Donetsk, the subject of a spring offensive that is supposed to cripple the fortress belt. Donetsk is the region of Ukraine that Putin covets above all others. Mineral-rich and long claimed by Putin to be the rightful property of Russia, Donetsk has been central to the maximalist demands that Putin has made if peace is to be declared in the war. Ukraine isn't willing to cede the territory. Russia is killing itself to take it. On April 8th, it was revealed that Russia is bleeding 316 soldiers for every square kilometer of Donetsk it's taking. That number is only going to climb higher as Ukraine executes a medium-range strike strategy that reached its zenith on April 16th. Among the Donetsk targets that we saw being struck in the video shared by the Magyar birds was an OSA-AK air defense system, which Russia has stationed in the occupied settlement of Vodyana. Ukraine also took aim at Russia's Rubicon unit, created specifically to serve as Putin's most dangerous drone experts. Rubicon wants to be what Ukraine is already proving itself to be, masters of drone warfare. On April 16th, Ukraine hit an unmanned aerial vehicle facility in Hirna, which it says was being used by Rubicon as a drone depot and workshop. The first separate center of the Ukrainian unmanned systems forces was behind this attack, and what it has achieved is the crippling of Russia's own drone strategy, right as Ukraine is coming into its own with its attacks against the Russian rear. Then, a bad night for Russia escalated. As air defenses and drone units in Donetsk burned, Ukraine was also striking hard and often in Crimea. Illegally annexed by Russia since 2014, Crimea was once one of the linchpins of Putin's strategy in Ukraine. A peninsula that was supposed to be well outside of the range of any of the weapons Ukraine has in its arsenal, Crimea was supposed to be a place where Russia would be able to gather troops and equipment that it could shuttle across the Black Sea and into the Ukrainian mainland. But over 4 years of warfare, Ukraine has gotten stronger, developed new weapons, and made the Black Sea routes that were so important to Russia unusable by a fleet that has lost a third of its warships and has withdrawn from its main Crimean port. On April 16th, Ukraine showed once again that it can hurt Russia in Crimea, and its targets were all over the peninsula. More of Russia's air defenses fell by the wayside. The Magyar birds report that Ukraine's drone operators took out a pair of deployment bases for Russia's Iskander missile systems. These missiles are often among the aerial swarms of munitions that Russia fires into Ukraine from Crimea. Ukraine is getting better at taking Iskanders down before they can cause damage. In an April 15th attack, Russia watched as Ukraine neutralized a trio of Iskander missiles in less than an hour, which highlights a level of air defense mastery that Putin never thought Ukraine could achieve. However, Ukraine knows that hitting Iskanders at their source is better than burning through expensive air defense missiles to take them out in the air. That's what we've just seen in Crimea, a revenge strike against the types of bases that Russia is using to send its ballistic missiles into Ukraine. If those bases go down, Russia has fewer options for launching Iskander missiles. And fewer options translates into aerial assaults that are easier for Ukraine to handle. There is a method behind the massacre. Ukraine's strikes are always strategic. Speaking of strategic, attacks like these are made possible because Ukraine has spent so long ruining Russia's air defense network in Crimea. April 16th was no different. Beyond the Iskander bases, Ukraine also destroyed a Pantsir S-1 air defense system in Feodosia and an ammunition depot that is used by the remains of the Black Sea Fleet in Mazyria. That's one less air defense system that Russia can use to fire back against Ukraine's Crimean strikes, along with more ammo lost by a fleet that has already been rendered tactically inoperable by Ukraine's campaign. And there's more, a lot more. Missiles, air defenses, and ammo burned on April 16th, but Ukraine also took aim at the most precious resource Russia has in Crimea. Liquid gold went up in flames as Ukraine took out oil depots across the peninsula. But before we get to that, this is a quick reminder that you're watching The Military Show. We bring you the full picture, not just the headlines. If you want to see more of this kind of insight, then make sure you subscribe to the channel. Ukraine's 9th Battalion of the 414th Brigade played a huge role in the Crimean strikes. They targeted a pair of oil depots, Hilboky Yar and Oktyabrska, as part of an ongoing Ukrainian strategy to make it impossible for Russia to move oil and fuel to its troops, or to sell it onto countries that could provide more cash for the Russian war machine. These depot strikes add to more attacks against Russian oil infrastructure in the Baltic Sea region, which has been burning for weeks now. Incidentally, Ukraine hasn't stopped hitting Russia's Baltic infrastructure. 2 days after the oil depots in Crimea were set ablaze, news broke that Ukraine had attacked the Vyazovsk port in the Leningrad region. Right now, it's looking like Russia has nowhere to turn if it wants to get its oil to where it needs to be. Speaking of follow-up attacks, Ukraine wasn't done with Russian oil depots after April 16th. On April 18th, the Kyiv Independent reported that a series of explosions had rocked the port city of Sevastopol, which is where the Black Sea Fleet was stationed before it turned tail and fled from Ukraine's constant attacks. Now the city's oil depots are in Ukraine's crosshairs, and one of those depots is what ended up burning due to Ukrainian drones scoring direct hits. This is a classic Ukrainian double tap. It hits hard, and then it follows up with another strike against the same target, all to send the message to Putin that what Russia is doing to defend its most valuable assets isn't working. Ukraine's drones can break through the defenses, and when they do, the consequences are always devastating. Oh, and as if Ukraine's wave of strikes in Crimea wasn't enough to damage the Black Sea Fleet, the last of them took out an ammunition depot used by the fleet. So it wasn't a good night for the Black Sea Fleet on April 16th. Already forced out of Sevastopol, that fleet has lost oil that is supposed to keep it running and weapons that it intended to use against Ukraine. Who needs a navy when Ukraine has drones that can ruin what was supposed to be Russia's naval advantage? Russia's military command in the occupied territories would have been exhausted by this point. Over and over, Ukraine's drones found their marks, but if Russia thought that there was finally relief following the destruction of its military assets in Crimea, then it had another thing coming. Ukraine wasn't done yet. In Zaporizhia, which is another region that Putin is trying to target in the spring offensive, a Buk-M1 air defense system located in the occupied settlement of Bahativka was taken out. We know Ukraine's pattern by now. If an air defense unit has been destroyed, that usually means that it was guarding a target that Ukraine wants to hit. Another strike in Zaporizhia is going to come. Now that the Buk-M1 has been taken out of the game, Ukraine has the safe aerial corridor that it needs to make the strike happen. Finally, it was over, at least in the occupied regions of Ukraine. There was one more target on Ukraine's list on April 16th, but this one wasn't in Donetsk or Crimea. Ukraine took aim at a military target in Russia's Krasnodar Krai region. somewhere near the settlement of Tuapse. The commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, Robert Brovdy, didn't say much about the attack at the time of reporting it. He said that details of the operation would be coming from the Ukrainian General Staff when it knew exactly how successful it had been. Those details are in, and they're not good news for Russia. The Kyiv Independent reports that Ukraine's drone strike in Tuapse has turned an oil refinery in that region into a volcano that can be seen from the Black Sea itself. The facility, which is owned by Russian oil giant Rosneft, is one of the 10 largest refineries in all of Russia. Ukraine struck fuel tanks at the refinery, and the Krasnodar Krai regional governor, Vanyamyn Kondratyev, trotted out the classic claim that it was drone debris that did all of the damage. Of course it was debris, Vanyamyn. It was just chunks of metal that caused massive fires that spread all over a refinery that outputs 12 million tons of oil products and is responsible for up to 10% of Russia's total exports of petroleum per year. If you believe Russia, the most accurate drone debris in the world has struck again. Sarcasm aside, this was clearly another direct hit for Ukraine, and it wrapped up a 24-hour hell for Russia. Worms, you're indeed. Ukraine sent the message, and it delivered destruction on a massive scale. Now Russia can only watch as more is coming, says Ukraine. What we see here is that Ukraine is built on a deep strike strategy that was already causing major issues for Russia with the new campaign. The occupied regions are no longer safe. Targets that Russia thought Ukraine wouldn't attack are being hit, and it's all due to Ukraine developing a new type of strategy in its deep strike campaign. The era of medium-range strikes is here, and Russia is hurting because of it. Another interesting little snippet of information revealed by Brovdy is that all of these strikes were made possible because Ukraine has created something new. Within Ukraine's unmanned systems forces is a deep strike center that has just been created. It's been designed to integrate long-range options against high-value targets. Euromaidan Press reports Brovdy as claiming, and we can assume that this center is the reason why several units were able to coordinate on the 16 strikes of April 16th so effectively. We don't know much more about the center than that. Brovdy isn't about to give away any secrets that might help Russia to prepare for the next series of strikes that Ukraine has coming. But what we do know is that what we saw on April 16th is a direct result of Ukraine developing a medium-range strike capacity that it hasn't had for most of its war with Russia. Ukraine has always been at the forefront of drone development since Putin launched his invasion. The short-range drones that Ukraine developed have now become a staple of the front line and have changed what we know about ground warfare forever. Ukraine followed that revolution up with the creation of deep strike drones that are now allowing it to attack Russia hundreds of miles deep into its territory. But what Ukraine lacked for so long were drones that could hit the middle. The short-range drones couldn't fly far enough, and the long-range drones were too valuable to use on targets in occupied Ukraine. There was a long-standing gap in Ukraine's drone strategy. That gap has now been filled. The Atlantic Council reports that Ukraine started a concerted effort to fill this gap in early 2025, as it started to develop a mid-range campaign that would hit targets in the 20 to 300 kilometer range. Command points, warehouses, air defense systems, missile complexes, and much more would be the targets of this new campaign. And how about that? What we saw on April 16th just so happens to have aligned with that list of targets. Ukraine has been busy building mid-range drones that are cheaper than their long-range variants and can deliver the appropriate level of destructive force to Russia's near rear. The last year or so has been the turning point. Between March 2025 and March 26, Ukraine pulled off 365 mid-range strikes, which is precisely one per day. Half of those strikes focused on Russia's air defenses in the occupied regions, the Atlantic Council says. Now we're in April 2026, and what we've just seen is an escalation of the mid-range strategy that started about a year ago. There's a reason why half of Ukraine's strikes up to this point, as well as several in its most recent attack, have targeted Russia's air defenses. This is a consistent and constant campaign waged by Ukraine to weaken the defenses that Russia has installed to protect its assets in the occupied regions. Every air defense system that goes down opens up a route to an even more valuable target: an oil depot, a drone hub, an ammunition storage unit. All of those targets are being hit because Ukraine has taken a calculated approach to its mid-range strategy. The technology has spent years in development, and it's now starting to shine. For Russia, this is terrible news. It means that the kill zones that have already been churning through Russia's troops in ridiculous numbers have been expanded. Early in 2025, Russia's troops still had plenty to worry about. Ukraine's drone-infested kill zones stretched up to 50 kilometers beyond the front, meaning any infantry had to navigate an absolute hellscape filled with the mangled bodies of their own soldiers just to get close enough to launch an assault against Ukraine's defenses. But now, with the advent of Ukraine's medium-range drones, the kill zones have tripled in size. Troops in the near rear are now targets. They're being taken out before they can even get into the original kill zones. in what has grown into a multi-layered drone defense strategy for which Russia has no answer. It's a campaign that has no end in sight, and it's starting to cause problems for Putin. According to the Institute for the Study of Wars, or ISW's April 17th battlefield report, there is mounting societal discontent within Russia about the scale of the sacrifices being made by the country's people to fight Putin's war. The ISW reports on the results of a poll by the Russian state-owned polling agency All Russian Public Opinion Research Center. That poll has recorded 6 straight weeks of declining approval ratings for Putin. The ratings have dropped from 72.9% to 66.7% between the week of March 2nd to 8th and the week of April 6th to 12th. After what Ukraine pulled off on April 16th, we'd imagine that there is a good chance those approval ratings will drop even further, especially in Tuapse, where a refinery burns. And that's the point for Ukraine. Its medium-range campaign is all about weakening Russia. Taking out assets deep behind the front lines means Russia's assaults on the front are weaker, and weaker results inevitably add up to more casualties, which forces the Kremlin to feed yet more of Russia's people into the meat grinder. After 4 years of fighting, Russia's people are starting to have enough. That's the genius of Ukraine's strategy. If Putin is so blinded by his ambition to take Ukraine that he refuses to stop a war that has already cost his country so much, it may end up being the Russian people who force a stop to all of this. Russian state-owned polling companies are showing that the Russian people are getting angry. And remember, these will be polls that have been massaged to show the best that they possibly can to the Kremlin. As Ukraine ruins more of Russia's military, the discontent will grow, and Putin may find himself dealing with another fight, this one from inside Russia itself. That may be a fight that Putin can't win. As for the front, we're seeing a fight that Putin is failing to win right now. On the back of its mid-range campaign and other strategic initiatives, Ukraine liberated a massive amount of territory while forcing Russia's spring offensive into a standstill. Putin's grand plans for 2026 are crumbling all around him, and you can find out why that's happening if you check out our video. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the Military Show so you never miss our analysis of the latest Ukrainian drone strikes against Russia. And thank you as always for watching.